Israel's war against Hamas is nearing the 3-month mark, and while some of the Israeli hostages held by Hamas were released during the last ceasefire, over 100, including women and children, remain in captivity. And while there are reports that Israel will be withdrawing thousands of soldiers out of the Gaza Strip, it's still unclear if the move is related to ongoing discussions about another round of hostage and prisoner exchanges. On one hand, the Israeli government has said that their main goals are to secure the return of all hostages and destroy Hamas's military and governing capacity in Gaza. But on the other, Hamas's Osama Hamdan said last week that while they're open to negotiations, the group is not interested in a partial or temporary ceasefire, and that the hostages would only be released after a permanent ceasefire is implemented. Joining us now to unpack the potential for another ceasefire is Gershon Baskin, the hostage negotiator who negotiated with Hamas for the return of an Israeli soldier. Mr. Baskin, thank you very much for coming back on Forum Daily.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We know that Hamas has said that any future deal has to involve a permanent ceasefire. In your view, will Israel have to end the war permanently and give up that military objective to secure the release of those hostages?
I believe that there's a chance for an interim deal, we could call it, if Israel were to take the initiative and make an offer to Hamas that it would be difficult for them to refuse. I'm talking about a ceasefire, another pause, but a release of a large number of Palestinian prisoners. There are about 8,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israel now. Israel could put together a list of several thousand and publish their names and use psychological warfare on the other side. Let the Palestinians pressure Hamas to accept it. Short of that, we're looking at the only deal that can bring the hostages home, all of them home alive, is the all-for-all deal and a permanent ceasefire. But let's face it, Israel can agree to a permanent ceasefire, bring back the hostages, release all the Palestinian prisoners, and then do whatever it wants, including restart the war and rearresting people that it released. There's nothing to hold Israel to a deal that it makes with a terrorist organization.
And I mean, that begs the question politically, there is a lot at play here. Domestically in Israel, is there appetite for ending the war or at least pausing it in exchange for
No,
more
there isn't.
hostages?
There isn't appetite. The Israeli public wants Hamas decimated. I think people are beginning to be a little bit more realistic as some of the experts weigh in and recognize that the task of eliminating Hamas is not something that can be done with the army. We can destroy their military capacities. We can remove the possibility that they will govern, but Hamas will still be around for a long time unless we fight Hamas with a better idea than the idea that Hamas has been giving to its people, which is resisting the Israeli control and occupation of Palestine. So we need to fight back in a different way. But I think that there is appetite in Israel, growing appetite in Israel to get all the hostages home. Every day that the hostages are in Gaza is a risk to their lives, and we've seen too many of them being killed already.
It was widely reported that the Egyptians and the Saudis were involved at some point in the negotiations. Can you share with us any information on what exactly the Egyptians and the Saudis were suggesting and how that proposal was received by both Israel and Hamas?
There was an Egyptian initiative. I don't think the Saudis are directly involved. The Saudis will probably be involved in the day after in the reconstruction of Gaza and helping the Palestinians to create some kind of unity government. But right now there was an Egyptian initiative, and the Egyptians know the Hamas very well. They share a border with Gaza. They have a lot of leverage over Hamas because the exit to Egypt is the main lifeline for the Gaza Strip. They know how to work with them, and the Egyptians actually put down a kind of a comprehensive deal in 3 phases that would bring about a release of hostages, a release of Palestinian prisoners, a pause in the war for a long period of time, the consolidation of a Palestinian government that would be able to take control of Gaza, and the eventual full end of the war. It was rejected, I think, pretty much by everyone, including the Israelis and the Hamas. But the fact that the Egyptians are taking the initiative and are heavily engaged in the negotiations is very good. Egypt is much more in line with what Israel wants to achieve in this war than Qatar, which is a state
Mhm.
that supports terrorism and has been the main backer of Hamas all of these years.
And we're back on Forum Daily with Gershon Baskin. Gershon, one of the core proposals for a long-term solution has been a two-state solution. In your view, in a post-October 7th world, is a two-state solution thinkable?
The irony of the two-state solution suddenly reappearing is that this is, in a way, a victory of Hamas, which has opposed the two-state solution. The two-state solution has not been thought to be viable for the past years. It's been off the agenda in the international community as well as in Israel and pretty much in Palestine as well. But all of a sudden it's back and everyone is talking about it again. The only way for it to become viable is for Palestinians to understand that it's real this time. Not another 30 years about talking about a two-state solution and having nothing happen. It's going to have to be made real by the OECD countries led by the United States recognizing the state of Palestine and granting Palestine as a state membership in the United Nations. There are 139 countries around the world which have recognized the state of Palestine, and Palestine is a non-member state of the United Nations, but that needs to be changed if we want to sincerely defeat Hamas and provide Palestinians with a reason to live and not just a reason to die. They need to live for Palestine to build their future state, and this needs to become a reality. I think it goes a line with what President Biden wants, and I would strongly recommend to him, if he wants to remain president after the next elections, that he's got to regain support of the young people in the Democratic Party that he's lost as a result
Yeah.
of supporting Israel in this war, and this could help him.
But what would you make of the critics of a two-state solution who argue that a Palestinian state, at least right now, could be potentially handing a terror organization like Hamas the legitimacy of statehood? How do you ensure
But
that the Palestinian people get statehood and are represented while at the same time not represented by the terror group who carried out the October 7th massacre?
right, there's a very long answer I can give. The short version of the long
Yeah.
answer is that one is that we have to be really smart about doing it. We have to go into negotiations in a regional way with the basis that we don't trust each other. So we have to build agreements that are based on the need to meet benchmarks that demonstrate commitment to the process and change. For instance, we need to start with education, with us, both sides reevaluating, looking at what we teach our children, our
Mhm.
textbooks. We need to build in benchmarks and have third-party verifiers and monitors that we're implementing our agreement. And the Palestinians need to commit to an electoral system that prevents the participation of political parties that support the armed struggle. That can be done. Democracies have a right to defend themselves. Almost every democracy has limits, fences around their democracy on who can participate and who cannot. And parties that want to destroy their neighbors should not be allowed to participate in those elections.
I'd like to shift gears here to discuss violence in the West Bank. You've said that the situation in the West Bank is about to explode. What are the factors that led you to say that?
Well, since the beginning of the war, I don't remember the exact number, but more than 200 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank by Israeli troops and by Israeli settlers. There are 16 Palestinian communities that have been evacuated because of settler violence in the West Bank. We have more than 150,000 Palestinians who normally work in Israel and bring money back into the economy, but since October 7th have been out of work. And Israel has been withholding the tax money that it collects on behalf of the Palestinian Authority, which enables the Palestinian Authority to pay salaries. The Palestinian Authority is the biggest employer in the Palestinian Authority. This situation is explosive, both from the political reality that exists there. Palestinian towns and cities are closed off with lots of Israeli checkpoints. The economy is at one of its lowest points in years. And they're watching every day on television Israel bomb their brothers and sisters in Gaza. So it's a very explosive situation.
We have about 40 seconds here. What are some of the potential solutions or things that need to get done to calm things down in the West Bank?
Well, the war in Gaza needs to end, and Israel needs to be on a path toward a negotiated agreement with the Palestinians and our neighbors for a more stable, secure region. That's what we need to do. We need to have the day after plan, which is part of the strategy for ending the war.
Mr. Baskin, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.